Welcome to our series, Driving Public Sector Innovation, where we look at how public sector agencies are unleashing AI-powered database solutions to drive innovation, improve agency operations, and deliver effective services more securely. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about how AI applications in the cloud and scalable databases are helping empower federal and state agency services is Andrew Davidson, Senior Vice President for Products at MongoDB. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. And let's set the stage a little. How do you see advances in AI and database technologies, as well as cloud computing, making a difference in enhancing the way government organizations operate and deliver services?
Great question, and good to see you again, Wyatt. This is a big topic, so maybe kind of breaking it down into a couple key parts. I think it's worth reflecting on really where we have been in this journey of getting to the point now where we are very much in a software-defined economy and increasingly in a software-defined government. And if you think about what really happens on the back end of all this software that powers every transaction, every engagement we have, every time we interact with our phones, every time an internal business process or internal government system is run, or anytime a citizen interfaces with the government in any way, the software that powers all of that, right behind that software sits this layer that is almost invisible to people, but it is kind of the workhorse of this digital economy, and it's the transactional database layer. I bring that up because this transactional database layer is something that we've sort of accepted for literally 55 years now as something that traditionally was centered in a model that was pioneered for a very different cost bottleneck in computing, the cost of storage back in the 1970s, the relational database model. We find ourselves today in a very new world in which there's new challenges and new bottlenecks, new cost bottlenecks. And one of the key cost bottlenecks today is actually empowering our software engineers, the builders of this software, to imagine a new kind of world that they could be living in, powered by new kinds of software, delivering amazing experiences to citizens, and empowering them to actually build that future, and empowering them as well to start upgrading and modernizing components that date back decades that are really holding back our innovation. The challenge is it's very difficult to really experience this sort of new world, a new world that certainly digital natives that are moving really fast have been building on from day one in the public cloud using modern database technology like MongoDB, which offers incredible developer experience around the document model. It's very challenging to actually experience that when so much of the investment that people feel kind of weighing down on them goes into just sustaining their large legacy environments. And now sustaining an increasingly large lift and shift environment where they bring legacy with them to the public cloud, where they thought they were going to get all these benefits, but sometimes it just became public cloud as another data center. And then people started kind of adopting cloud services, thinking, I'm going to be modern now if I'm adopting cloud services. But unfortunately, the way a lot of people have adopted cloud services is to just bolt a lot of them together, and you get these kind of spaghetti architectures with sprawling cost and governance overhead and complexity. And I think people are realizing, now I have these three environments: legacy, lift and shift in the cloud, and sprawling out of control cost and complexity. And now I have to ask, how can I afford to do anything new that's truly modern when I just have to invest a lot to stay afloat with what I've got? Budgets aren't necessarily increasing. And so there's this real challenge. All of a sudden, Gen AI is coming into the picture, and people are realizing we're going to be able to build classes of software for the future that are really going to change the game. We have to be ready to adopt this. We have to be kind of future-proof in the way we build software. And yet, folks are realizing if I go cobble together a whole new architecture, it's a fourth box that I have to just basically manage and upkeep across my massive infrastructure and technology estate. And so this is such a tension and a challenge. And I think where we sit at MongoDB, centered on the power of the document model, which allows developers to build the way they think, the way they code, and on the power of the fact that the document model is flexible and allows you to express the boundless fidelity of the real world, and on the power of the fact that it's more fundamentally scalable by virtue of storing data the way it's accessed. You have a key set of building blocks that allow you to start replacing core components of that legacy estate in a modern foundation. And this is where we come to the power of Gen AI, which requires new use cases like retrieval augmented generation, in which we layer into that transactional database capability and the power of the document model, new access patterns, stochastic, approximate access patterns powered by vector search. So with MongoDB, our flagship offering for the government, which is MongoDB Atlas for Government, we today have vector search capabilities integrated in there. As a builder, it's a first-class experience. It's all right there, ready to go. It's enterprise ready. The query experience is elegantly integrated, but on the back end, your vector search infrastructure is independently scaling on optimized hardware, the best of both worlds. And if you look at this architecture of the moment for Gen AI, which is called retrieval augmented generation, it's really centered on two fundamental things. Taking in that natural language input, turning that into a vector-based nearest neighbor query to find through vector search relevant context in the operational data store, and then hybridizing that with other query capabilities and filters to ensure that easy role-based access control means that only appropriate data gets passed back to the user. And this allows you to really use a prompt engineering pipeline from what gets pulled back from your operational database into a large language model, pass that back to the end user that requested the access, whether a government employee or a citizen. And that loop, that retrieval augmented generation or RAG loop, is so easy when you have the power of the document model plus vector search at your fingertips. So we're in an exciting time where people are getting that now. It's all starting to click, and they're realizing, I don't have to adopt a new stack. The same stack that I was able to consolidate a lot of my legacy infrastructure into, this scalable foundation in MongoDB, allows me to now have the benefits of building generative AI applications.
Well, I really appreciate how you put all that in perspective. And you raise an interesting point about, kind of the legacy and technical debt that agencies still are encountering. Talk a little bit about where you believe government can take practical advantage of these technologies and capabilities, given the constraints that they're still working within.
Yeah, I mean, this one is also layered because, I think in the government agencies, we're still at the beginning of really empowering small teams to move fast and build incredible software for government use cases. Traditional organizational structures and ways of building have been slow to change, but I think we're starting to adopt the mindset in the public sector of empowering the, quote, two-pizza team, the small team that can really move mountains and is fairly autonomous, minimizing dependencies. When you have that team building with modern software building blocks on the power of a flexible and scalable foundation, they can really inspire other teams to realize, wow, I could be building fast as well. I could be getting away from just that the weight of all this debt that's making it feel like we can't move forward. And then when you layer in the power of Gen AI that's sort of changing what's possible in software that can be expressed by those small teams, you start realizing that in a sense what's happening is we can now build use cases in our software that are essentially more ambiguous in nature, or that can handle more ambiguous tasks. Traditionally, software was very deterministic, very specific. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was very easy to test for. Now we're building new muscles. We're asking ourselves, what does it look like to be in a more stochastic world, a world that traditionally has been the realm of people only? And while it's still very early, I think the key point is teams need to start building those muscles. These are fundamental engineering questions. How do you start using models? How do you start using capabilities like vector search? And how do you start weaving those into your software in a way that's controlled, evaluated, iteratively improving? How do you ensure that you have the right privacy controls? Where do you start? Most likely you start with internal use cases for government employees, allowing them to service their citizens more efficiently or better than ever before. And you're going to want to dip your toe in the water on these use cases that allow you to really wrap your arms around this. The good news is starting now sets you up so that you're not behind. And guess what? Right now, a lot of this generative inference is slow. It's costly at scale. And so starting now means you're going to ride this wave as it gets faster, as it gets easier to do real-time throughput for generative inference at scale in the years to come. You'll be able to put this to use in more and more interesting use cases. So many of the starter use cases are, of course, the chatbots and the internal knowledge assistant. And all of that's great. It's going to help with productivity. It's going to help deliver better experiences. But there's so many cool use cases to come in the future. One cool example, we're working with a global automaker. They will literally record sounds in all of the car engines around the world. And based on the different kinds of sounds they're hearing, they're going to use vector search to understand what is the most likely diagnostic issue based on a corpus of diagnostic related sounds that they've recorded. They can then make intelligent recommendations to a service center employee to fix that car more efficiently. When you think about that concept, being able to build something like that, it's the kind of thing that you might have tried to build in the past, but it might have taken you years of attempts to really bring it to life. Nowadays, those types of concepts become within reach, I think, like never before. And the government has countless use cases like that all over the place.
Let's talk about that a little. How are you starting to see, or how do you believe at least that these AI-enabled database and analytics tools can improve the services that governments provide their constituents from the end user's point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially we're going to have almost certainly human in the loop. So, if I'm interfacing with a public sector employee in connection with some kind of a service that I'm, receiving or asking for help with, that employee is going to have a lot more assistance at their disposal than ever before, which means they're going to be able to be enabled. They're going to be able to scale their own impact like never before. I think that's the near term. That's where everyone's getting started. And of course, that's probably step two. Step one is starting to build really early test groups in a central controlled manner, maybe running some hackathons where you get your teams familiar with these new kinds of tools. I think we will start seeing step three, which will be more full-featured experiences that are starting to power things that we can't even imagine yet in the coming years. I think it's just inevitable that as this becomes more real-time, at scale, it becomes just a feature you'll expect in every software interface that you have. What I think I get very excited about is just thinking about how much of the government today is just trying to keep up with this massive paper load, the massive, backlog of things to get through and process. When I think back, for example, to I think it was a Wall Street Journal headline, of the cafeteria of the IRS. When you think about really meaningfully getting through that and meaningfully getting ahead and becoming on the front foot so that the citizen feels like they're getting assistance almost before they thought they needed it, not many months, after. That's what we're talking about here. So many core government missions, I think, can really meaningfully get changed on this. It's going to take time. We're going to have to govern it. We're going to have to really learn about all the privacy best practices and techniques. But I want to reiterate, the privacy aspect of this, especially with retrieval augmented generation, at first it's so overwhelming sounding. But the key thing to keep in mind is the model uses public data. And what you're doing is combining your private data with role-based access control through a prompt engineering pipeline through that public model. And what that allows you to do is really easily reason about only using private data appropriate to be shared back to that private context person. And once you kind of realize it's actually very controllable, it doesn't certainly reduce all of the classes of challenges people are dealing with, like hallucination and many other challenges, but it at least ensures that you're not mixing people's data in ways that you're not going to be comfortable with. So I want to really reiterate, I think a lot of people are struggling to even know where to get started. And if you just look at retrieval augmented generation, you'll start seeing use cases that can really enhance aspects that you're building today.
And then lastly, can you comment a little on how you see these AI-enabled databases and analytics technologies, helping to improve security and speed up agile development and, enhance operational resiliency for government agencies?
Yeah, we think back to what I was saying at the beginning, that we now generally in our industry have this sprawling estate of complexity, legacy environments on-prem and lift and shift environments in the public cloud, and out of control complexity of, quote, cloud native environments in the public cloud. I think what we're realizing is the more environments we have and the more moving parts and the more glueware that sits between them and the more we've had to sprawl ourselves across lots of different systems and engines, all of that means we just have to invest that much more in governance and risk analysis. And the more we have to invest in governance and risk analysis, frankly, the slower we move. And so we end up finding ourselves almost in this impossible situation where it's like, I'm at the point where I can't move forward at all because I know that there's so much complexity across my broader estate. And the only way I can keep it all governed is to not take on anything more. And so something's got to give here. And I think that the beautiful thing about this is once you realize that you can actually reduce the sprawl, once you realize that you don't need a transactional database and also a search engine and also separately a key value store for continuous availability and high availability, and also a cache to make it fast, that you can kind of flip it on its head and have a document data model that's flexible with continuous availability and scalability, with rich secondary indexes and transactional capabilities and search indexes and vector search indexes, and that it's in one singular experience so that it's fast, so I don't, in most cases, need a cache. Then you realize I've simplified my estate. And when I've simplified my estate, I've made it so that a smaller team can build with a simpler set of building blocks. And then when you think about what it means to be in the cloud operating on abstractions that don't allow you to turn off good security defaults, it means those small teams are able to move fast knowing that they couldn't shoot themselves in the foot. And once you accept that all of that is progress, then you realize I could start really replacing some of the historic stuff if I start modernizing into that simplified foundation, smaller set of building blocks, empowering smaller teams. And I think in the end, what you find is you have a much more secure foundation to build on.
Well, Andrew Davidson, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on ways that AI-enabled databases and analytic tools can really actually streamline the work for big enterprises like government agencies, and really what some of that future is likely to look like. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.